Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of Is This Pilot Actually Good? Where we try to look at a show through its first episode and first episode only and answer that very question. And with this video, we're doing it all about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is... It's an interesting one to do because we've talked about a good many pilots at this point. This is probably the first one that neither Jess nor I have seen all that much of. I've probably seen maybe 3 or 4 episodes over the course of my life.
And I have seen 0 episodes. I haven't seen any of it at all. I have seen the movie. I am a fan of the movie. I really enjoyed it a lot. I like Christy Swanson a lot in that movie. I really like Luke Perry. I enjoyed the movie so much that I ended up never watching the show because I was nervous that it wasn't going to hold up to what the movie held up to for me. But after years and years of people talking about the show, how good it is, it's long been on my list now to watch.
I had a really good friend in college who was just like so obsessed with it, and this really was like a show for my generation. I knew a lot of people who watched it. The characters were maybe a few years older than me at the time in which it first came on in 1997. For some reason, I felt like Buffy was too cool for me, which I don't know why I believe that, but it was just one of those sort of things. I think I talked about it with friends too back at the start of this series, but it was a fun thing to kind of get back into and watch. I've never seen the movie. I knew a good bit about it, the people who are in it, so on and so forth. But we're going to break this down. We'll talk about whether or not this pilot is actually good, if it's worth watching the rest of the series. Before we do, if you like this video, give us a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other updates. So, in just talking about the pilot itself, there's a couple of interesting notes to just bring about here, because this is a weird journey to the show getting on the air.
Yeah, it is.
The movie itself, it does have very much a cult following. You are far from the only person who enjoys the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, but apparently one person who did not enjoy it as much was Joss Whedon himself, because it seems like the show is in some ways him trying to be able to create more of the story that is akin to his original vision. I think there was sort of a feeling that, okay, tonally the movie kind of went a little bit off course of what he wanted the show to be. It was very campy and funny from my understanding of it based on what you've told me.
Yeah, and that's why I loved it. I mean, you can't name something Buffy the Vampire Slayer and then be like, oh, it's going to be a really, dark and deep piece of work. That's like saying, oh, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Expect it to be really dark, guys, or, Mars needs more women. You know what these movies are going to be about in that feeling of them. I expect when I have a movie called Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the poster work is like someone wearing cheerleader garb with like a stake, I expect it to be campy, funny, a few little darker moments there, and I got all of that. And going into the show, this is also what I expected, because that's what the movie was like, and that's why I loved it, and I make no apologies for that.
I don't have anything to compare it to, really, but it's still an interesting journey even beyond just that, because there was sort of an original pilot that came about a year or so before Buffy itself ends up airing, and there's a different Willow in that. There are some other elements of it that are changed. There's a lot of reshoots. We've talked about this with Big Bang Theory, Game of Thrones. You don't always sort of get the show right at first. It takes some tweaks to try to get it closer to what you really want, and I think this overall is probably closer to the Buffy that Joss envisioned, though if you're saying it's similar to the movie in a lot of ways, maybe the differences and the tone kind of shifts more as the series goes on.
Yeah, for me, this pilot was surprisingly similar to the movie in some ways. Now, it wasn't as campy as the movie, but it still had some of that feeling of it where it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's still very fun. The vampires are fun. Buffy is fun. It had all that very lightheartedness, the jokes, like It definitely had that feel. The other thing that this show did that was similar to the movie that I really liked about the movie was the soundtrack. And the Buffy soundtrack's a really iconic movie soundtrack, like Hackers or these other types of soundtracks that you listen to over and over because the music is so spot on. This show does a really great job keeping that up with, really catchy songs, sort of that rock and roll feel that goes along with her being a vampire slayer. Like, I really like that.
It is so late 90s. Like, this entire pilot just screams that era. Like, I remember people dressing like this. Yep. I remember listening to this kind of music myself. And, it really makes me feel old. Like, looking at the video presentation of this and seeing, this is so far and away from HD. And it's not that long ago. But, to me, what I really like about the pilot, the music's obviously a part of it, but it's also something that I know Joss was interested in from sort of the start, is that is subversion of the trope, where typically on these movies, the character of Buffy, the young girl, sometimes they're a cheerleader, sometimes they're just one of the popular kids, maybe sometimes they're an outcast, but usually like the blonde girl is one of the first people killed in the horror movie, and now they get to become the hero and the focal point.
What I liked about this, too, is that in the movie you had Buffy just discovering who she is and what she can do and getting trained and all that sort of stuff. And here we have sort of, it's like Buffy a little bit later, where she already kind of knows what's going on. She's already dealt with this at another school where she burned down the gym for asbestos, / vampires. So she knows what's going on. She knows who she is. And we're kind of now into the throes of who she is and her really kind of dealing with that, how it changes things for her. As, normal teenage life, that's not really something that she can get, but it seems like something she really wants.
I'll be the first to admit that I am a total sucker for an origin story. Like, I like sometimes the sort of discovering oneself and the slow build-up and the montage of trying to slay people and it going really, really terribly.
We'll watch the movie later.
Well, see, I want it on the show, though. Like, I want to consider the movie to be its own thing, and it's like, I wanted a little bit more of that out of the pilot, at least. Like, I wanted to see more of this sort of stuff, and and it's great if the movie presented more of that, and it sounds like it did.
It did.
I wish that there was a little bit more in the pilot of sort of establishing what makes her different, because it does sort of throw you in pretty fast, and here's, vampires and danger and crazy makeup, and it's like all this stuff is going down, and it's really just in the first couple of minutes it's going down.
And some super strength. I mean, yeah, they obviously didn't explain that very well in the pilot. Maybe they will a little bit later on. The thing that I liked that they did in the pilot, that I know we kind of disagree on a little bit, but I liked that by the end of this pilot, everybody who I haven't seen any more of the show, but everybody who I think is going to be like part of the main crew all knows what's going on and what the deal is with the vampires, with Buffy, with sort of that whole feeling of it. Everybody's in on it, because normally we run across this where it's like the Arrow, the Flash, where people find out throughout the first season, oh, I had no idea, oh, you've been lying to me, all of those fights and the normal tropes that we see. That is not happening here. Everybody is on the same page. What is going on here? So it makes me really excited to see sort of, it's not just Buffy burning down the gym by herself. Now she's got a crew of people to burn the gym down together.
That just means you're going to burn more than just the gym. That just means like the poor cafeteria is going as well. Now, I like the trope. I'll admit it. I really like the trope of having to get to know people, and then you sit around and you're like, oh man, I wonder what it's going to be like when they find out. Like, I cannot wait to do the Chuck edition of Is This Pilot Actually Good? Because I spent a lot of chucking like, oh man, I can't wait. Like, what if Morgan finds out the secret? And you build it up for so long. And I don't necessarily think, it's bad the way that they handled it. To me, I would prefer, if you're not going to wait multiple seasons, which is fine. You don't have to wait multiple seasons. You could maybe give us 5 or 6 episodes, then somebody finds out, then another couple episodes. Like, I'm more down for the slower ride, but with that being said, Buffy goes on to have a number of seasons and is considered to be one of the most iconic shows of its generation. So what do I know when it comes to this?
I think it's just some of the stuff that Buffy did really right is that they took some chances with stuff like that, because that slow ride into people discovering that you have superpowers or whatever's going on, you're killing vampires, that's been going on for decades of television, that they have, oh, the hero has a secret. What's going to happen when people find out? So them taking that kind of a risk was a very huge risk. I, off the top of my head, can't even name another show that's done this. So it's, I liked it because it was such a risk.
I tried to think about that too, because we talked a little bit about that before recording. I was like, okay, what's a show that's really gotten the whole gang together right away? And it's like I'm watching Stargirl right now on CW, and maybe like episode 5, episode 6, people start to come together, but that's like 5 or 6. That's not the pilot.
Yeah.
It's a very different sort of thing. It's something that a lot of people probably do really like. And like I said, I don't hate the choice because it does give you some fun interactions, and I think some of the chemistry between the cast is there almost right away.
Yeah, and it's cool too because, I haven't seen episode 2 yet, but having everybody kind of figure out what's going on, but not having that conversation yet about what's going on, it makes me excited for episode 2, because then you're going to have the whole crew come together and have that scared, fun, crazy conversation where they all lay it out and start to have reactions about it.
The thing that I probably love the most about the pilot is just that it really gives you a world where it feels like almost anything is possible. And I know that's kind of a cliche thing to say, but I think in a show that has vampires, you want to believe that at any given moment, like, a werewolf is going to pop out of the ground, or that everyone is going to start turning into demons. And I always sort of think with this sort of stuff, it's got to be such a trip being in a writer's room for this, because you have like ultimate creative license to sort of do whatever you want. And that potential, it really just gets like your imagination running wild. And I could see myself, if I was watching this in the late 90s, being like, oh man, I want to see this on the show. I want to see that on the show. It's about more than just these characters and shipping and all this other stuff that goes into TV.
The other thing I really liked is how they worked with the Buffy character to make her someone who could be instantly popular, but because she already feels like an outcast, because she has this deep, dark secret that she's slaying vampires, she can't tell anybody, and she can't really relate to anybody, that even though on the outside she looks like she should be a popular kid, and right away all the popular kids are pulling her in, that she doesn't actually feel like she's a popular kid. And I really like that, because that's not always something that you see.
No, and I think it's good that they don't just make her like the ultimate outcast, everyone hates her, because we've seen that 100 times already, and we don't want to see her be, the most popular kid, because then you're not really an underdog at all, and it's not fun. It's a good balance. It's a different balance. It probably makes Buffy a lot more relatable, because the majority of people out there are more like Buffy than they are, the ultimate outcast or the most popular kid. It's usually somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, it's true.
So let's talk a little bit about how old we feel by seeing how young other people are in this pilot.
Listen, when David Boreanaz showed up on this show, oh my goodness. Holy smokes, I felt so old, and even for a second, I didn't even recognize him. He was so young, and then he spoke, and I was like, oh, it's him. Oh my goodness. So yeah, woo!
It took me a minute, because I knew he was in the pilot, but I kept thinking in my head, oh, that's David. Where's David Boreanaz? When he's coming? And then when he comes on, it just still took me a second to recognize him. And I was just, because there's a lot of guys who are kind of from that era that look reasonably similar, but then I was like, that's David Boreanaz. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, that was really it. Yeah, it made me feel pretty old, but it was still cool to see. Like, yeah, he's changed a lot.
Yeah, and and there's a young Allison Hannigan, and she still looks like Allison. We have gone through the entire Allison Hannigan filmography.
Yeah, she really does still look the same, which is amazing. Good on her, man. Tell me your secret. But it was Yeah, no, it was cool to see her.
Yeah, she's one of my favorite characters, at least from this pilot, because it feels like she is sort of that really, she's not, once again, I don't feel like she's the least popular person ever, but she's very socially awkward and she has a difficult time with people and she's introverted.
And she's really self-aware.
Yeah.
So when it's like, hey, when Buffy's like, oh, I'll be right back, she's like, it's all right if you don't want to come back, you don't want to come back, because she knows sort of where she stands. So it was nice to have that moment where Buffy's like, no, I will be back. Like this is happening for us.
Yeah, it all kind of contributes to what I just think is a fun pilot. And I think this was airing at a time when there wasn't too much out there like it. Yeah, you look at it now, some of the effects are a little bit dated, and it's very clearly a product of its time.
Some of them held up okay.
Yeah, some of them held up okay. There's a couple of things where I was just like, I don't, but the story's good enough that I think you sort of look past it. The thing that is dated the most is the Starbucks reference where they sort of talked about Frappuccinos being a trend or whatever. Like, there should just be
and now everyone's Instagramming every cool new frap that comes out. Look, it's the unicorn frap.
Yeah, if only the Buffy cast could see Starbucks now.
Okay, but I will say that James Spader joke still holds up because it's still true. He's like this just icon that everybody always thinks he's cool, no matter how old he is or what generation it is. Yeah. Liking James Spader doesn't ever stop. So when I heard that joke, I was just like, oh man, this many years later, it is still true.
Yeah, and the thing is that while I don't think every effect is great, I love that they did use a lot of practical effects, because at least that's going to make it age a little bit better than, say, some movies that were really early on in the CGI era. Like, you go and you watch the first Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, and it's just like, okay, this doesn't age great.
Yeah, or I've only seen sort of the beginning of the first Harry Potter that I ended up not getting through because the CGI owl was so weird looking at that point, because I didn't get to Harry Potter until way later. That I was just like, oh, this didn't really age well.
No, but I think as we're trying to move into that question of is this pilot actually good, I think this is a good pilot. It's not, I wouldn't put it in my top 10, top 15, anywhere in that sort of realm. It feels to me like Buffy is one of those shows where you watch it and it gets stronger as it goes along, and by like super season 2, season 3, maybe you start to really become solidified. But I think it does enough right to sort of make up for what I think are a couple of things that aren't, fully my cup of tea, the gang getting together so quickly, but I did enjoy it. It's fun, it's different, it subverts tropes. I appreciate the effort that they put into it.
For me, I think that this pilot was actually quite good, and that's from somebody who was not willing to give this show a chance for, what has it been now, like 20 years? I watched this movie and I was like, nope on the show for the longest time. You're not going to do better than the movie. I don't want my movie experience to get ruined. I will not give you a chance. I am really glad that I gave this show a chance. They did a really good job with it, where they took some of the elements from the movie that I liked, but they still kind of made it their own, and they put Buffy in a different sort of time period where she's already been doing this a little bit of time. I ended up really liking it. To me, the thing of, is this pilot actually good? Would I watch the next episode? Did it do enough to make me watch? And even just that to be continued at the end with the vampire coming into the casket or into the vault with her, that's enough to get me to come back and be like, how'd she get out of this? Because that vampire was a lot stronger than some of the other people that she's dealt with. So I'd be watching again.
Yeah, and I would be watching again too. I always really feel like as long as you got a solid pilot, every show is worth at least a few episodes to sort of see how it builds and improves. But that is our take on the Buffy the Vampire Slayer pilot. But if you guys watched it way back in the late 90s, what did you think about it then? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you did like this video, give us a like, subscribe, and you can support us further by checking that link in the description to the store. And we'll see you here next time.